Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. Today, our special guest that we've got is called Gavin Howarth. And Gavin is the owner and MD of Howarth, who specialise in HR, employment law and health and safety. So, Gavin, great to have you on board.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and I promise I said to you already I wouldn't mention Leeds, but I'll leave that off the agenda for today.
Well, that's fair enough. And I have brought my Leeds United cup.
Oh, good.
Although I've blurred the screen. There we go. So yes, I have managed to get in.
Good. So I just want to appreciate Gavin giving up his time today, but we're going to be talking about transforming HR. And for our viewers, Gavin's had 7 questions sent to him in advance just to prepare so we can get his expertise from today. So, Gavin, before we go into the 7 questions, would you mind just telling our audience about your career history or how you become an owner?
Yes. So potted history is that my mum and dad started the business 20 years ago, almost to the day, 2nd of June it was, 2003. And I qualified as a solicitor at what was then Hammond's, a law firm in Leeds city centre, did my training contract there, and then once I'd finished that, joined the family business 13 years ago now, and I've been running it for the last 10 years as MD. And then we did an MBO, so I bought mum and dad out 2 years ago to become the outright owner.
Fantastic. And you must be really chuffed.
Yes, I'm delighted. Yeah, mainly for all of us as a family. It's been a bit of a dream, to be honest, Stephen, for us to, for mum and dad to start the business from home with no contacts, never been in business before. My dad was 49 at the time, so late coming to the business world in some senses. For us to get this far, 20 years on, and have a successful transition to the second generation, and us all still be friends and love each other still as much, and that's the real goal, I think. So I'm really proud that we managed to achieve that.
Nice, fantastic. And it's also the bit that I see on LinkedIn. You can see that family engagement, the success, the passion that comes through, which I know you share on LinkedIn, which is wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And mum and dad are still involved in the sense that we have our own foundation, the Howarth Foundation, which my dad's the CEO of. And my mum still volunteers and works within. So a proportion of our profits at Howarth's go towards the Howarth Foundation. And my dad runs that. So whilst mum and dad have got no involvement in Howarth's, they run the charity. And so, we're still very much working together as a family, which is lovely.
And you're still smiling, which is good.
Exactly. That's the main thing, isn't it? Because otherwise, what's it all for? You're going to fall out with your family about it. So the number one thing for me was, if we're going to do the deal, we need to do it in a way that we all still love each other in the end and have got relationships. And I've got 2 kids, grandchildren, mum and dad, seeing them. So I feel lucky that we managed to achieve that.
Nice, fantastic. And it also just shines through. So I know, when we see on LinkedIn, the comments from your dad, how well and how proud you are from that perspective. And also, I think we talked off air about the cycle ride that you've just done as well, and really chuffed for your dad. So you can just see it, so which is great. And also, I think I saw on LinkedIn this morning where you and I engaged that your wife has been now part of the team as well.
Yes, so 8 weeks now. Jen's been with us, heading up marketing. So that's been an interesting transition, but it's great again, and it's all going really well. So
And does it stop at work as work, or when you go home, are you still talking about work?
That's the bit we're still trying to get right, to be honest, Stephen. So we've probably ended up speaking about work quite a lot outside of work, and we're having to rein ourselves in, but it's only because we enjoy it, really, and we're having ideas, and so it's not a bad thing, although you do have to curb it a little bit because it can take over otherwise.
Definitely. But I'm good on you. I'm really chuffed, and it's really good to see. So if we move into our 7 questions, and I know that your specialism isn't the HR world, but I've asked you today because of your organisation and how you work. So what would you see is the common HR issues or common problems you see in organisations that you work with from a HR perspective?
Yeah, well, where do we start? So just for context, there's 35 of us in the business and 3 specialisms. Like you said, we've got our employment law team, solicitors and advisors, what we call our HR growth team, working on what I would call the proactive side of HR. and then our health and safety compliance team. So that's our 3 specialisms. The problems, the way I see HR from a non-HR person, but an MD's take on HR, if you like, 2 sides to it, reactive and proactive. The reactive is essentially that if we employ people, there's going to be fires in our business every now and then. Help us put them out smoothly and efficiently, so ultimately we don't end up in an employment tribunal. Simplifying it, but that's the core. And then the proactive side of it, I think when a business reaches a certain level of maturity, starts to ask itself questions like, how do I recruit better? How do I induct better? How do I performance manage better? Increase engagement levels, attract talent, all that good stuff. Circling back around to your question, I think on the common problems on the reactive side, I think are what you'd expect. Things like disciplinaries, grievances, sometimes discrimination, 2P on acquisition. SMEs having the knowledge to be able to keep compliant with the law, with all the different facets of it. And as you know, employment law is ever changing, ever expanding. So that's a challenge within itself. And then the proactive side, I think some of the common problems, I think personally, are in the SME world, which is where we specialize, is just fundamentally small and medium-sized businesses understanding the power of the people piece. And they're not underestimating actually what change getting the people piece right can make to the business. And I think personally in we may come on to this and shut me up if I'm going on too much, but in 2023 and beyond, in a post-COVID, post-Brexit world, this type of stuff, which may have in the past been regarded as a sort of nice to have, call it people, call it culture, call it engagement, call it employee experience, whatever. This type of stuff is now, I don't think, is no longer nice to have. It's critical to a business being here in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. And I think that's one of the big problems is SMEs understanding the importance of that rather than HR being, oh, what's it actually add? It's a cost on our budget. It's always getting in the way, always telling us what we can't do. It's not like that anymore, I don't think.
No, and I agree with you, because there's a bit of and I love the way you said about reactive, proactive, because I see a lot of organisations that HR people have gone into the role to be coaches, strategic, what true HR, and they've done their qualifications, but they're firefighting. So every day is like treading through treacle. And then the other part I really liked from the kind of proactive point of view, that if organisations, SMEs really take their people serious, great colleagues are now harder to come by. And retention and engagement, those kind of things. And actually, rather than just seeing it as a tick box piece of paper, it can elevate your performance by 30-40% by having some great people that you look after and you kind of develop and serve well. So I think you and I are perfectly aligned. Actually moving forward is so important.
I think that's right. And two points to pick up on, if I may. On the first point you made about the role of HR, I actually think that in the SME world, a lot of HR people are recruited into the business without the board really knowing what they're recruiting them for. And that's I don't mean that in any disrespectful way to the board of directors, because if you haven't had a HR function before, how will you know exactly what that function should perform? But for example, I spoke to a HR director who is involved with a business with 400 plus staff, and just casually asked, look, if you were to look at the HR world as reactive, proactive, like I've just put it, just off the top of your head, give me a feeling for how much you do reactive and proactive. And in that size of business, I would have expected a lot of it to be proactive. In fact, exactly what you said, it was the opposite. The vast majority of the role was running around the business, putting out fires. And actually what that person wanted to do and what the business needs that person to do, although they might not know it themselves, is the proactive side, because that's what makes the difference. And moving on to that second point, and just to echo what you said, that's absolutely right, because the formula underneath the proactive side, I believe, is increased engagement equals increased productivity equals increased profit. So this type of stuff's not, this kind of fluffy, nice to have, what does it add? This is like hardcore business, commercial reality. And the beauty of it is, as in all best deals, it's a win-win for both parties.
Yes.
Because the individual has a better experience at work and enjoys their job more and enjoys the colleagues and the team and is more engaged with work, and the business is thriving commercially, which is bringing success for all.
Yes. And I love the bit there, Gavin, about win-win, because that is the key to it. And all the work that I work with a lot of clients, and they seem to think of kind of like mediation, leadership, coaching, all that kind of stuff, and not even changing people's policies is all nice and tree huggy.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's a commercial lens to either save you money or make you money and actually get those colleagues feeling better and more productive. That's the key to it. That's the sweet spot, rather than it's just like to everyone to feel nice.
Exactly right. And I think the only way to achieve that and is you have to speak the language of the board.
Yes.
So what language do boards speak? Money.
Yeah.
So how as HR enthusiasts, let me call myself, because I don't want to make out I'm part of the HR group without the qualifications, but is to speak money to the board, because that's what language a board understands. So I will often say, look, studies will show that someone who's unproductive will be doing productive work for 2 days out of 5 on a full-time equivalent. Someone who is highly engaged with work will be productive 4 days out of 5, roughly speaking. So if you're paying a £20,000 salary to someone who's disengaged with work, you're only getting 8 grand's worth of productive work.
Yeah.
And then boards start to think, oh, crikey, that's a lot of money. Times by how many people are disengaged in the business across all the different sites and departments, you could be losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
And now I've got, all right, okay, I'm listening now. I can hear this bit, because we're starting to talk financials.
Yeah.
And sort of build from there, I think.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of a disconnect.
And I totally agree, because it's one of those ones that when I'm working with companies about influencing people, so our HR colleagues are what I call, they go with their heart. So they get the inclusivity, they get the mental health, they get the well-being, they get the engagement, retention, they understand all that stuff. But the people that have the purse strings are the CFO, the COO, CEO. That's where I come in and connect the head and the heart, like you do, and give the kind of the maths to it and the figures that people go, I can see why we want to put these new policies in or these changes, because it's going to save us X amount of money and we'll be more productive. But it's getting them both working together. Whereas when they're separate, they don't gel.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
No, really good. And where do you see organisations letting themselves down from kind of a people person, etc.? Where do you, from your experience of 20 years, where would you see organisations let themselves down?
Well, I suppose there's many different areas, but the first one that springs to mind, I think, is when a business is scaling, and that reactive proactive HR bit is, I think there's an underestimation of how important first line managers are in that transition. So going back to my example of the business with 400 staff and the HR person doing 80% of reactive work, when really what we want is proactive. The only way a HR function can concentrate on the proactive side of HR, and again, just to repeat myself, i.e. the bit that's going to move the needle for the business with high engagement, high productivity, high profit. The only way HR can concentrate on that is if some of the HR, the reactive side of HR, is dealt with somewhere else.
Yes.
And that somewhere else is with managers.
Correct. Yeah.
So it all kind of interlinks in a way. And I think, again, maybe an underestimation, and I think businesses find it out themselves when they get to a certain size and things aren't working quite as well, when they start to see that actually this management tier, whether it's the SMT, the SLT, or first line managers, they need upskilling to be able to handle a degree of reactive HR work to free up our HR team to do the proactive stuff, which is going to make a difference to the business. Yeah. So I think that's a common one.
Yeah. And that is so true, because I say to people, line managers take the paycheck to be a line manager.
Yeah.
That's not just always the good times. That's also times with the bad times, the kind of people issues or concerns where line managers, I've worked with some great line managers, they step up, they really care about the people, those kind of things. Whereas I see the poorer line managers, if I say, subcontract the issues to HR.
Yeah.
And then HR accept it. So in theory, the line manager's gone, right, done and dusted. I'll do the good stuff. You do the people issue stuff. And that's where I get them, which I love your kind of analogy today. They're just overwhelmed from that perspective.
I think that's right. And, I try and put it in really sort of down to earth examples, but like you say, it'll often happen where an employee comes into work on a Monday morning and they say, to their manager, I've received a letter in the post saying I've got to go to jury service for a couple of weeks. I've never had that before. What do I do, and how do I take leave, and what do I get paid? The typical response from a line manager in an SME business will be, go speak to HR.
Yes,
They'll sort it for you. When in actual fact, the answer to that question will already be in the staff handbook, mainly, because it'll say in there, if you work for this company and you get a letter saying you've got to go on jury service, here's what we'll pay you, here's how your leave will work, etc. So the answer will already be there, and it's something that the line manager could deal with.
Correct.
So, but I'm not criticising line managers. It's about the managers being upskilled.
Yes.
The whole business understanding the interplay between management and HR.
Correct.
And all working together to make that happen. But I think that's the only true way that a business can successfully scale through the levels, is by putting that structure in place. And I always say the evidence for that is, if you look at companies who are bigger, who have been on that journey, that's the structure they have in place, and it's because it works and it's right.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing about growth, of actually what structure works from an organization. And what training would you see? So I'm probably jumping ahead of the question, but what training do you see out there, or what would you give for your leaders or anything like that? What do you see works well?
Yeah, so like yourselves, we are ILM accredited, so we do ILM accredited training for managers, essential management course, which we run in a different formats. But I think there's a couple of elements to that. There's a sort of leadership element, almost a contextual setting of what it means to be a manager, because I think none of us, when we're in school and we're speaking to the careers advisor, will say, what do you want to be when you get older? I'd love to be a manager. I've not met anyone who's actually said that. We just end up in these management roles, and typically in the SME world, that's either because we're good on the tools, and I mean that in the widest possible sense, or we've just been in that business a long time. Neither of which are particularly good reasons to get promoted to management, but it's typically how it works. So I think there's a little bit of contextualizing. Just look, being a manager is a tough job. It is a hard job, especially in SME world. You're expected to wear 20 different hats. But if the business is going to scale successfully, it's a critical role. And putting it bluntly, like you referred to earlier, Stephen, you actually get paid a premium for doing it. So if you want the premium, you're going to have to do the extra bit of work, which comes with managing. None of us manage exclusively. We've also got a job to do on the tools, typically in SME world. But we've also got to find a way of managing, because we're getting paid for it. But I do spend a little bit of time contextualizing it with the relationship with HR, because I think the why is incredibly important. So rather than just, here's what you should do, it's, well, here's why you should do it, because it will free HR up. They can concentrate on the proactive stuff. Here's why that stuff's really important. And here's how the business will improve as a result for all. So a little bit of that. And then, of course, you get into the more technical stuff. As a manager, I do believe you need to know a little bit of employment law, because you need to know the boundaries for which you can set and how you can work. So like disciplinaries, sickness absence, equality, all that good stuff as well. So the more technical stuff you need, but as well as some leadership, management, contextual setting.
And I like, it's kind of what the role the manager plays, isn't it? So actually, from an SME or larger company, if you know, and you and I were chatting about football earlier, if you know the position you're playing, it's a lot easier than if you don't know the position of playing. Human beings, we fill gaps, so we just assume that that's a good thing or a bad thing, or I've seen that elsewhere. But having that structure of, let's just show you what role is expected of you, let's give you the development, let's teach you some employment law, it's so important. And I think the other bit on there about teaching people employment law, it gives them confidence that they can do things. I see so many leaders going, no, I can't talk to that person, or I can't, they've said this. No, you can go and talk to them. These are the boundaries or rules you stick within, but they're good boundaries and rules, aren't they?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And you see that often in, for example, sickness cases relating to mental health.
Yeah.
So, if an employee or member of staff is off work as a result of low mood, depression, anxiety, typically speaking, and I understand it from the line manager who is untrained or unexperienced, you can see some nervousness about how to address that, what to say, what not to say. But clearly that's no good for the business, nor usually the employee concerned either.
Yeah.
And something that starts small or could have been small then ends up escalating, costing the business money, not being a great solution for the employee either. So, absolutely right. It's about empowerment, I think.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think businesses as well should be brave enough to understand that, look, if we're going to elevate this position of manager, and it's going to be really important, and we're going to provide training into it, not everyone may come on that journey.
Yeah.
You may have someone who says, well, actually, now we're having this and I understand the future and what's required of being a manager, and I'm not too bothered about that premium you pay me. I'll go back on the tools. Fair enough. That's the solution as well.
And it's giving people that confidence to say, actually, this isn't right for me, or this is, different route. Because I've seen so many people over the years that are good at individually at their job. Then they get promoted, and then it's like you're now managing 10 people, 20 people, whatever, those kind of things. And it's like, get on with it. And I see so many people struggle rather than, and I've said to quite a few people over the years, are you enjoying your job? No, I can't stand managing people. And I go, well, why don't you do something else that you enjoy? And it's like a light bulb moment for them to go, oh yeah, actually I can do something else and enjoy it. So rather than people going kind of fighting through it, there are other options, isn't it?
Absolutely. I agree. And perhaps part of that is this unconscious and maybe societal pressure to climb the corporate ladder.
Correct.
When in fact you can expand roles outwards, not just having to climb upwards. So no, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit where if more organisations realise that, how can you expand the role or credibility, pay, however you look at it, you'll have people enjoy the job rather than I see a lot of people, especially when I worked back in the bank, I said to them, why do you want to move up the ladder? Money. And then eventually I said, well, what's the money for? To get my own house, mortgage, family, those kind of things. It wasn't the job, it was the money. So actually, I think if more organisations had a look at how they want to skill or upskill people or pay people, I think there'd be a happy, more harmonious place, and people go, yeah, I can see a future for myself here, rather than I'll go elsewhere just to get more money.
Yeah, agreed. And I think trying to keep it simple, as we do here in Yorkshire, I say a lot here, and I think to myself, when we're speaking on the board, it's round pegs, round holes.
Yes.
And I think but it's about your ability to know people. What super strengths, I do genuinely believe that we all have 2 or 3 sort of super strengths, things that really suit us. And I think it's more about doubling down on those than it is in trying to correct weaknesses. And I think that's up to managers and boards to have the emotional awareness and intelligence to be able to understand what those superpowers are amongst your team. And then put people in the right roles that allow those to flourish. Because then I don't think it feels so much like work. Because you're in your lane, you're in flow, and everyone's succeeding as a result. So, but that's knowing your team, isn't it? And that again, just to swing backwards, that is part of the role of being a manager. There's no blueprint anyone can give you as a manager to say, how to get to know your team almost, or which members of your team are going to be like this. You've got to be able to do that, haven't you? By speaking to them, understanding, listening. Which are the ones that need coaching and stretching? Which are the ones that are actually okay, they do a great job, but they go home and have a life outside of work? Which one's which? How do we get round pegs, round holes to create an overall great experience for everyone?
Excuse me. And I love the way you said about super strengths on that, because it just reminded me of with colleagues that I've managed over the years. I worked on their strengths, because then it would knock on to the other bits of the business and other kind of development areas.
Yeah.
I used to get incredibly upset when we had people that were so-called working on their development areas. They hated it. They were not very good at it. It demoralized them, made them unproductive. So I just agree with you. Please work on people's super strengths or those kind of superhero bit, because it knocks on to other areas rather than keep penalizing people that they just don't look forward to it.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. It is the imagery, isn't it? It's trying to get a square peg into a round hole. And it's just, I totally agree.
Yeah. And what would you see by changing HR to more proactive, what would you see the benefits are for the colleagues in transforming that way? What would you see how colleagues would benefit?
Well, just 2 points, I suppose. One is just to make the point that I think the compliance side, the reactive side of HR, is incredibly important, obviously, and it's the building block and the starting point. So I just want to contextualize that, because there's no use having a fancy engagement tool that tracks everyone's engagement and if you haven't got contracts of employment.
Correct.
So the compliance bit is the building block, and I see the foundations before you put the shiny house on top. But yes, once that's bit's right, then moving on to the proactive things. I mean, the benefit, like we said earlier, it's a win-win for both. And I genuinely do believe that in 2023, the dream outcome for SME businesses is to have increased top line revenue, increased bottom line profit, increased return to shareholders, and be a great place to work with a queue of people outside the door wanting to work there. Now, that might sound utopia to some, but I don't think it is. And there's a study come out recently, I'll misquote it now, but Willis Tower and someone, a big consultancy in London, and it's all about employee experience. And it talks about how companies with these fantastic cultures will empirically return 3 times more to shareholders than the competitors. So just re-emphasizing our point, this isn't nice to have fluffy stuff. This is hardcore business, commercial reality. And I think I'm passionate about it because I think, yes, I want businesses to succeed. We only advise businesses, so I want SMEs to succeed. And this great country is made up of SMEs. 96% is SMEs. So I want SMEs to succeed. But like we said, the best deal's a win-win. I think if SMEs succeed, the individuals within them also succeed. And they have a better time at work. They enjoy work more. And we've all seen it in our personal lives, haven't we? With ourselves or others, if you don't enjoy work, it has a massive impact on your life. So I think by creating stronger cultures, high performance cultures, intentional cultures, cultures that are worked on, and people strategy gets further up the board agenda, it's a win-win for all parties and people enjoy work more. So I think it's important work for the country, because also we've got a productivity problem, haven't we? And driving productivity is really important. But I think you do that by driving engagement levels. The emotional connection someone has to the business, it's so important.
And I just to pick up there, so sorry to interrupt, about the words you said about intentional. That is a very good kind of point. I've seen a lot of organizations that play lip service, and we want to do a good culture, Steve, and help us do culture and all this kind of stuff. And then you start to say to them, well, it starts with the top. Let's have a look at your vision, values, where you're going, and etc. We don't want to do that, Steve. We're not interested in that. Just, make the culture better. That for me is non-intentional. Whereas the actual true company, I work with some really great companies that are so focused, so intentional, they're deliberate in what they do. That I call it the North Star, that colleagues are aligned to where the company's going. They believe in it. I just think that's such a good feeling. And I've got to be honest, it's that I've seen the better feeling of people in productive companies and profitable companies feeling good. Versus people that, and I worked in a bank that was, during the banking crisis, that wasn't a nice place to work. Whereas actually when the banking world was going good and, it was all great, people were getting bonuses, people were great, they loved it. But when it was shrinking, that was the world was ending. So I definitely agree with you. There is that bit about intentional profitability. It creates engagement. And I'm not saying it's all about money, but money helps to pay for people's better development, better benefits, those kind of things. It does create a nicer atmosphere, doesn't it?
I think that's right. And I think, I suppose we have to be realistic and say that it's not that you can't make money without having a high performance culture, clearly. And there's many businesses, and we still may meet business owners out there who you have a conversation with, and I'm not really bothered about a great culture as long as I'm making money. And okay, that's one thing. But I do think the tide is turning.
Yeah.
And I think that's because employees have more voice.
Yeah.
And rightly so, more choices, rightly so.
Yeah.
So I think the tide is turning on that. And I think the early adopters, or those that understand, not even early adopters anymore, I wouldn't say, but those that understand this people piece and grasp it now, because you can't build a culture overnight either, can you?
No.
That's the other thing.
No.
It's not something you can turn on and suddenly you've got a great culture. It takes years, and it also requires maintenance at a higher level. So, those that kind of grasp it now, fundamentally understand it, and like you say, are intentional and mean it, I think will be the winners in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. Because as I say, because of how the market is, and I don't think it's changing.
And I think, Gavin, I'm going to start a campaign about you being the next chancellor. So I think we'll get that campaign going, because I'm definitely behind you. And
thank you. I'm just bringing myself down, because once I get on it, I'm excited about it.
But the bit there is about the passion coming through from you about SMEs, about how it contributes not just to the SME, but the country, the economy, those kind of things. Massive knock-on effect. So you're looking bigger than just kind of internally. What else kind of plays a big difference to it? And what else would you say that kind of helps organisations? So I know we talked about profitability and those kind of things, but what else, by really grasping, transforming HR, culture, etc., what other benefits are there to organisations by really adopting this?
So like you say, we've talked about increased productivity. I'm always slightly hesitant to say increased profit, because it depends what the business is doing, how they're investing, etc. But more financial success, a greater experience for the people who work within the business. And then one thing we haven't touched on as much, although we've referenced it, is talent acquisition. And it's a very media term, but war on talent, and I don't particularly like. But I understand that talent is difficult to acquire, and if you believe that people make a business, then this becomes number one on your agenda. And I do. So for me, it doesn't matter how fancy your website is, your HQ, your machinery. Without the people, none of it works. So building an employer brand proposition, which is a very HR term, but is critically important, isn't it? And I think being the employer of choice for the top talent is really important. And I think it, and I've seen it in our business over the 20 years. It's the people that make all the difference. And the ability of the people, and I don't just mean hard skills as well. I mean, well, what people typically call soft skills. I don't like that term either. I call them power skills, but hard skills, power skills, emotional intelligence, awareness, but it's the people that really make the difference. So the other benefit, I think, on top of everything we've talked about, is the impact on the brand, to the recruitment market, but also to competitors, to everyone else. Building that employer brand proposition and creating a queue of people outside the door who want to work there. In that business.
I really like that bit about a queue of people outside that want to work there. And I think there's a bit there of too many companies get complacent. And think that person's been there 5 years, 10 years, they'll always be here, those kind of things. So I do keep believing that you've got to reinvigorate and keep people motivated, and kind of from that perspective. And like now, the talent out there, I'm very lucky. I employ a great colleague, a really, really good colleague, that's worth her weight in gold. Absolutely worth her weight in gold, that makes a difference to the brand, the organization, those kind of things. And I've seen that with your company, about people that represent. You want them representing you kind of in and out of work, how they behave, those kind of things. That's definitely worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. I mean, your existing team turn into your recruitment team in a way, without ever asking for that to happen, or because they're just very passionate and engaged with the business. And in fact, for us, 35% of our current team have come through that channel, i.e. a recommendation from an existing team member.
Yeah.
Because they're, they love the business and are enthusiastic about it, so they mention it to people, and they bring in talent that way. So again, really important, and again, being intentional about it, I think, and working on it. And that's a lot of what I do on LinkedIn is, try and fling the doors open to Howarths. Demonstrate the values and ethos of what we're all about, and it may well put some people off and think, nah, that's not for me. Fair enough. And then, but others will say that's perfectly for me, and will send me messages through LinkedIn saying, if there's an opportunity that comes up, I'd love to work there. And so really important.
Yeah, and it is about going back about Johari window, really showing that arena about yourself, and really kind of demonstrating to people, this is who we are. This is kind of words and actions mirror the same, because I've seen it so often with organisations, which we briefly touched today. Words and actions differ. And can become quite hypocritical and kind of jar with each other, those kind of things. But I definitely see the successful companies, words, actions, beliefs, values all connect and really align. And people just go, do you know what? It's not a job. I just like being there. It's good fun. We have a good sense of humour, but we get the job done.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. In 2023, the value of transparency to the customer, but also the your potential recruitment market, it is critical now as well. Whereas in the past it might not have been so. I think people now do want to understand and see the inner workings and the thoughts and where are we going and what do we stand for, and and again, I don't think that's going away.
No. And I think the other bit, like you would see as well, like different recruitment adverts I see where people are just lying to colleagues, and I think they're only going to be with you 5 minutes and see through the truth, and they're going to move on. So treat people with dignity and respect. Be honest with them. This is what we're paying. These could be the bonus ranges or whatever, that kind of stuff. People go, great. Do you know what? You've been honest with me from day one. Whereas what I really kind of struggle with is when people are dishonest, and then a colleague starts the job, they've left another job or whatever, and then they go, this isn't what was sold to me. That for me is really kind of a bad organisation.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And just swinging back to a previous point, that we have to find ways of competing other than on salary, don't we? Because there's always someone who pays more. So it's very likely that every member of the team are able to go elsewhere and earn a little bit more money or a lot more money somewhere else. Now, of course, the salary has to be competitive, but we have to find ways of making our business attractive despite that fact. And I think, again, the recruitment market are also looking for that as well, because it's not all about money. And I think COVID taught us that a little bit, didn't it? People realigning their life priorities. And
well, I spoke to a colleague this morning where I'm working today, and they were saying that one of their colleagues with a job wasn't about the money. It was about work-life balance. It was about travel time. They got used to through COVID that was more important. And I think now the recruitment world, or employing people, you have to be really kind of clever, sensible. What's going to appeal to people to want to work from you? It's not all about money. And it's about job satisfaction, how they're looked after. And I think colleagues, generation X, Y, Z are now looking for more culture, diversity, inclusivity, those kind of things. It's not, in my day, starting the bank, I want the money. It's now a wider range to kind of appeal to people, which I think is great. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that point about building a culture and it not being overnight is one thing, but then the maintenance of it. So, for example, diversity, inclusion and belonging, we have our own, what we call our DIB committee, diversity, inclusion and belonging. But, and I'm shooting from the hip here, but say 10 years ago, that the whole concept and arena of diversity, inclusion and belonging didn't really exist. It didn't feel like it existed. It wasn't a thing per se. And now it is, and rightly so as well. So, you don't just build a culture and then leave it. Society's always changing. Well-being is a big thing now. Diversity, inclusion and belonging is very important. The sustainability of what we do clearly is moving up the agenda more and more rapidly. So you have to have your finger on the pulse and be adapting to what the future recruitment market wants and needs are as well. And also, but in line with what you believe in as a business. So you have to have your own values, of course, and if some of your values might be regarded as old school, I think it's fine to maintain those, provided they're fair, of course, and legal. But if you still feel that those are important, despite the way society is moving, then that's okay if you're clear about it. And you, like you say, you have a golden thread of what you say is actually what you do. Then that's fine as well. But some adaptation to how the market's moving, I think, and a blend between the two is the secret sauce.
No, definitely. And what else do you think organisations can do to kind of support their HR teams? What else do you think kind of companies can do to really kind of elevate that proactive performance?
Yeah, so well, we work with two different types of businesses, I suppose. Those who don't have an internal HR function, to those that do have an internal HR function. And I think, so thinking about the latter category, which I think your question pertains to more, i.e. businesses with who have built out, even if it's only a one-person HR department, I think what would help on the proactive side is a lot of the themes we've talked about today is just an understanding of the importance of HR and the difference it can make from senior leadership. So the MD, the CEO, the CFO, finance director, commercial director, whatever it might be. I think if that top table understood in the way that we've talked about it, the importance of the proactive side of HR, the people piece, the culture, the employee experience, and that trickle down through the business. So I think it's just perhaps the top table supporting HR in that sense. Because I think a lot of HR departments know this, what we're talking about, and feel it, but feel somewhat frustrated that they don't have the ability or time or resource to be able to execute it in the business. But I think that's, you know, the only way to do that, I think, is to get the top table on board. To find a way of doing that.
I think you're spot on there about the top table, but seeing as HR is important rather than get us out of jail police, or, you know, that rather than seeing them, like, you know, sort out the disciplinaries, all this kind of stuff, it's actually being proactive. Going back to your bit, how do they play a big part in this organisation to move through the future? That's I think, going back to, I think you said the golden thread, that's the bit that's going to elevate kind of, and also your capture. Because, you know, there's a big, massive market out there for HR colleagues at the moment. It's a HR market. So if you want the best of the best, try and make it a true HR job rather than a firefighting role.
Good point. I think that's a great point. That's absolutely right. And something that HR professional can get excited about. Agreed.
And just a last question, which we always get asked from kind of our viewers, etc. What is your self-development, your goal for this year? What are you working on in Gavin's world?
Oh, that's a good question. So much. I mean, I'm a keen learner, self-learner. I listen to many hours of podcasts, read a lot of books, and probably quite hard on myself. I think one thing I do want to do is make sure that I'm enjoying the successes along the way. I posted about it quite recently when we quite a few years back now, but when we first hit our £1 million turnover. So just to tell that story very quickly, it was, we'd worked very hard, and from £0 to £1 million revenue is a hard slog. I don't think there's any shortcut for that, but we sort of held up that 7-figure turnover as the, you know, the sort of mirage in the desert, that if you could get there, it'd be fantastic, and what a feeling that would be. And we got there, and when we did, it was great, and it was nice to feel that we've hit 7 figures. But my mind immediately went to, well, that's really cool. What next? And how we're going to make how we're going to do more than that. So, and I am very conscientious and head down and dedicated, and probably quite hard on myself and pushing us on. But I don't want to get to later in my career and think, you should have let up a little bit, and I'd enjoyed enjoyed it as well on the way. So I'm just want to remain very conscious of that, I think, and make sure I do that and not regret it later.
Excuse me. And I think that's a really important thing. Even through my early career, it was what's next. I've got that, let's move on. What's next? And I think it's when I read Sir Alex Ferguson's book about celebrating success, and I thought, he's probably true in that, absolutely, about actually enjoying the moment, the present, because
Yes.
I know in myself that I don't always enjoy the present. I'm always on the future or the next journey. Whereas I think actually to go, do you know what? Excuse me, we've done a good job. Let's celebrate that success. And I'm not being funny, to achieve £1 million turnover should be, treated as a great phenomenon in a business. From that point of view, I won't ask you about your next financial goal, because that'll be driving you forward for it. But I won't ask that. Excellent.
Well, I mean, it will, and I suppose we've just had a non-exec director join us actually in the last 6 months, and Elizabeth, and she's been brilliant. And one of the conversations around that has been, which I think is a very important question for us all to ask, is the why.
Yes.
And you may have these grand aims, which are great, and we all should have goals to achieve, but why? And why make the sacrifices, and why push yourself so hard, and what are the ultimate benefits and successes you want to enjoy? So a little bit of that work I think over the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I shall watch with bated breath to kind of see, and also successes, because I do love watching out on the LinkedIn posts. So from my perspective, Gavin, it's been an absolute joy to have you as a guest today. Really, really appreciate it. And I think before we come on air, we said we can even do a podcast about football, and we can kind of digress. So I really appreciate you coming on board today, and also with your your honesty and openness. And how can people get in contact with you, Gavin? What's the easiest way to kind of contact you or keep an up to date with Howarth?
Thank you. And just to say, I've really enjoyed it myself as well. So thank you for having me. I always feel infused with energy having great conversations. So thank you. Probably through my LinkedIn. Just Gavin Howarth, Howarth, and the company name's the same but with an S, Howarths. So I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, as you referred to, and I keep posting and updating everyone. So on there's probably the best way.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And fingers crossed with Ipswich and Leeds next year. So I'm an Ipswich supporter, so that'll be a good game to go and watch next year. So good luck with that as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I know I nearly did pick you up then for finishing on Alex Ferguson, of all people.
I thought I'd only briefly mention it.
But no, absolutely. Congratulations to Ipswich, and look forward to that fixture.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gavin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen.